girl gang, it's Dr. Joy here and you are watching Delivering Joy MD TV. Welcome to Well Woman Wednesdays. We've been talking about sexually transmitted infections and oh my gosh y'all, we are finally to the end of this series. Who knew there were so many infections out there? But today we're talking about viral hepatitis, hepatitis B and C specifically. So make sure you keep watching to get the details. All right, girls, so we have finally made it to the end of all of these sexually transmitted infections. And I want to talk today about hepatitis B and C. And I'm going to lump them together because both of these can cause what's called viral hepatitis, or basically infection of the liver. And hepatitis can be quite dangerous because in some cases it can cause liver failure and you need your liver. So I want to talk a little bit about how these viral hepatitis infections are transmitted, how to avoid them, how we test for them, and all that good stuff. So viral hepatitis can be transmitted sexually. In fact, in teenagers and adults, that's the most likely reason that they may develop hepatitis infections. Any blood or body fluids can transmit hepatitis. So that's semen, if there is a wound inside your mouth and you're doing deep open mouth kissing, that can be a source. If you have other wounds on your body, say like a surgical incision, and it's oozing any sort of body fluid, that too can transmit hepatitis. So hepatitis is one of those viral sexually transmitted infections that we need to know all about. If you've been following along in this series, you know that the last time the CDC really looked at the sexually transmitted infection rates in the US was 2018. So all of the data that we have, the up-to-date data is from 2018. In 2018, there were over 3,000 cases of viral hepatitis. So let's dig into the transmission. So hepatitis is transmitted by blood or body fluids, right? So sexual intercourse is certainly a way to transmit it. If you are using injectable drugs and sharing needles, or even if you're using prescription drugs and sharing needles. I know some folks might even share insulin needles sometimes. It's for insulin because they're running low on supplies. So any sort of needle sharing, any sort of blood or body fluid is going to transmit this. I also want to talk about how hepatitis is not transmitted because some of y'all be going way to the extreme. So, you know, hugging someone, closed mouth kissing, sharing food or water is definitely not going to transmit hepatitis. But if you are exposed to their blood, but if you are living with someone who has hepatitis and you're exposed to their blood or body fluids, and you also have a disruption in your skin, or you are exposing their blood or body fluid to your mucous membranes, like your eyes, your nose, your mouth, that can potentially spread hepatitis, but those cases are pretty rare. If you're living with someone who has hepatitis, you can still love them, right? So you don't have to avoid hugging them or touching them, but you do have to avoid things like using their toothbrush and their razor, because these are ways that you can transmit hepatitis to others. If you know someone who's using injectable drugs, you don't want to be sharing needles ever. Like that's just like a big no-no. So in terms of the hepatitis infection, once you have been exposed to the virus, it can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months for symptoms to actually develop. And about half of people who are infected with hepatitis are going to even develop symptoms. So you could be infected with hepatitis and not even know it. Hepatitis can go away on its own, or it can become a chronic infection. The real problem is when it becomes a chronic infection, because this can lead to a chronic liver infection that can cause you to have liver failure or even liver cancer. So that's why it's so important to be on top of this diagnosis. So when you're going in for a well woman visit or you're going in for STD testing, hepatitis is something that you definitely want to make sure is on the list of things that your provider is testing you for. So In terms of developing a chronic hepatitis infection, the younger you are, the more likely your chances of having chronic hepatitis. So babies actually develop chronic hepatitis about 90% of the time. Toddlers and kids under age 8 can develop hepatitis up to 30% of the time, whereas teenagers and adults are only going to develop chronic hepatitis about 2 to 6% of the time. So the younger you are, the more dangerous this infection can be. And hepatitis C is much more likely to cause chronic hepatitis and lead to liver failure or liver cancer. So who's at risk for hepatitis? We really should all be knowing our status and getting checked on a regular basis, especially if we are engaged with multiple partners, if you're having sex with multiple people. Knowing your status is very important, but certainly men who are sleeping with men are at a much higher risk of getting hepatitis, and women who have multiple partners are at higher risk. If you have had other STIs or sexually transmitted infections in the past, your risk is elevated. If you're pregnant, we certainly want to know whether or not you have hepatitis, because as I just mentioned, children, young children especially, are at much higher risk of developing chronic liver disease from hepatitis. Testing for hepatitis includes blood tests. So normally this is just a tube of blood that's drawn at your appointment, and we send it off to the lab for hepatitis antibodies or hepatitis antigens. And these are proteins that are produced when your body is exposed to the hepatitis virus. And we can test for hepatitis B and C that way. In addition, if those tests come back positive, we should test your liver function to make sure that you are having normal liver function. Folks who have positive hepatitis testing should then be referred to a gastroenterologist or an infectious disease specialist who can help them take care of this particular disease. And they're very good at treatments. There are treatments for hepatitis B that are available, and there's even a cure now for hepatitis C that's available. So it's very important to get to the right person who can help you take care of this infection and try to help you avoid developing chronic infection or liver failure. The hepatitis B vaccine is very well known and has been used for years. Hepatitis A as well. And so you want to talk to your healthcare provider about whether or not you need to be having vaccinations against hepatitis. If you have had exposure to hepatitis, there are what are called pre-exposure prophylaxis drugs that you can take. So being vaccinated against hepatitis B is great to have that protection on board. If you know that you are at risk and have a partner that may have hepatitis B or C, you may want to engage your provider about taking medications to prevent the spread of hepatitis. Let's say you had sex with a partner who you later found out had hepatitis. You can also talk to your provider about post-exposure prophylaxis, or basically kind of like where you take medicine on the back end to try to prevent you from developing hepatitis. So let's talk a little bit about prevention. You already know what I'm about to say, so I don't even know why I keep saying this, but the truth of the matter is monogamy, not having sex with a bunch of people, right? So just being monogamous with your partner can certainly help lower your risk. Of course, it doesn't eliminate it, because just because you're faithful doesn't mean they are. So monogamy is very helpful. Vaccination is another prevention strategy. So being vaccinated against hepatitis can be helpful. If you have an open sore, cover it up, because the more that you expose your open skin to, other people's body fluids, you are at risk of getting all sorts of infections that way. So covering up any skin lesions or any wounds is very important. And make sure that you are properly using condoms at each encounter. That is the best way to prevent all sexually transmitted infections. Knowing your status is so important, and it's important that you go back and get the results. So going and getting tested is not enough. We actually have to go back, get the results, understand the results, and know where we are and what we need to do to take the best possible care of ourselves and of our partners. So I hope that this video has been helpful for you. I hope that this entire series has been helpful for you, and that now you know all the tea on sexually transmitted infections. If you've got questions or comments, Drop those down in the comments section. I'll be happy to engage with you about those. And make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss a single Well Woman Wednesday. I'll catch you next Wednesday, girls. Peace.